For 6 years, the whole town of Millbrook painted me as the perfect wife, the woman who sacrificed everything for love. They'd see me at the grocery store, exhausted, gray creeping through my hair faster than it should, and they'd touch my arm with that pitying look and say, "Helen, you're an angel. Thomas is so lucky to have you." Lucky. I want you to remember that word, because by the end of this story, you'll understand just how poisonous it really was. My name is Helen Carter. I'm 72 years old now, and I'm about to tell you about the day I discovered that my entire life, 6 years of backbreaking devotion, of swallowed tears and sleepless nights, was built on a lie so twisted, so calculated, that even now, 16 years later, it still takes my breath away. Hello everyone, before we continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel, and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. Back to the woman I used to be, the fool who thought love and duty were the same thing. It was a Tuesday morning in March, cold and gray, the kind of morning where even the sun seems too tired to try. I remember standing in our bedroom, his bedroom, really, since I'd been sleeping on the couch for years, staring down at my husband, Thomas. He lay there in that hospital bed we'd installed after the accident, his body perfectly still, eyes open but vacant, staring at the ceiling like he'd been doing every single day for the past 6 years. The morning light coming through the window made his skin look almost translucent, like he was already halfway to being a ghost. "Good morning, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. I'd been up since 4:30, like always, because Thomas needed to be turned every few hours to prevent bed sores. The doctor had been very clear about that. Very clear about a lot of things. He didn't respond. He never did. I moved through the routine like a machine, checking his catheter, adjusting his position, propping pillows under his legs just so. My hands were steady even though my back screamed in protest. I was 56 then, but I felt ancient. Felt like I'd aged 20 years in 6. "Today's your quarterly checkup," I said, smoothing the blanket across his chest. "Dr. Morrison retired, so we're seeing someone new." "Dr. Singh, I think her name is." Nothing. Just that empty stare. I bent down and kissed his forehead, a habit I'd maintained even after all feeling had drained from the gesture. It was what a good wife did. What a saint did. But here's what I didn't know that morning, as I carefully fed him his breakfast through a straw, as I wiped his chin with the same tenderness I'd once used on our children when they were babies, I was living in a prison of lies. And the warden? He was lying right there in that bed, watching me serve my sentence with those empty, calculating eyes. Let me paint you a picture of my life back then, because you need to understand what I'd become. Every morning, I wake at 4:30 a.m. Turn Thomas. Change him. Bathe him with warm washcloths and gentle soap, taking care around the pressure points. Feed him. Administer his medications, so many pills, I had a chart on the wall just to keep track. Antispasmodics. Muscle relaxants. Anti-anxiety medication. Pain management. The list went on and on. By noon, I'd be at the library where I worked part-time, just enough hours to keep the lights on, because Thomas's medical bills were drowning us. My boss, Margaret, would look at me with such pity. "Helen, you should take some time off. We'd understand." But I couldn't afford time off. Not when the medical debt was piling up like snow in a blizzard. Evenings were physical therapy sessions at home. I'd move Thomas's limbs through their range of motion, trying to prevent the muscles from atrophying completely. His legs felt like dead weight in my hands. Sometimes I'd talk to him, tell him about my day, about the books I was shelving, about Mrs. Peterson's cat that kept escaping. He never responded. The doctor said he probably couldn't hear me, that the brain damage from the fall was too severe. But I talked anyway, because what else did I have? Nights were the worst. I'd collapse on the couch around 11, every muscle in my body screaming, and I'd lie there in the dark wondering, is this my life now? Is this all there is until one of us dies? The answer, I thought, was yes. I was wrong about so many things. You're probably wondering how we got here. How a retired high school English teacher ended up as a full-time caregiver to a paralyzed husband. The accident happened on a Saturday afternoon, 6 years before that March morning. I remember it was raining, one of those cold autumn rains that makes everything smell like dead leaves and regret. Thomas and I had been arguing. About what? I can barely remember now, something about money, about my sister Claire. Claire had always been a sore spot in our marriage. She and I had been close once, before our parents died and left us a modest inheritance. Thomas thought I'd given her too much of it. Maybe I had. Maybe that was my first mistake. But that day, that rainy Saturday, Claire had been at our house. There was shouting, I remember shouting, and then Claire stormed out, and Thomas was at the top of the stairs, his face red with anger, and I said something. God help me, I can't even remember what it was. And then he fell. I can still hear it. The sound of his body tumbling down those hardwood stairs, the awful crack when his head hit the landing. I screamed. I ran to him. Called 911 with shaking hands while cradling his bleeding head in my lap. At the hospital, they told me his spine was damaged. That he'd never walk again. Might never speak again. That I needed to prepare myself for a lifetime of caregiving. I remember thinking, this is my fault. We were arguing, and I caused this. That guilt? That crushing, suffocating guilt? It became my prison guard. It kept me compliant for 6 years while I slowly disappeared into the role of devoted wife, of small-town saint, of the woman who sacrificed everything for love. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the guilt was the whole point. Claire disappeared after the accident. Completely. Utterly. Like she'd been erased from existence. I called her that night from the hospital, sobbing into the phone. Claire, it's Thomas. He fell. He's paralyzed. Please, I need you. She hung up. I tried again the next day. And the next. Her number was disconnected within a week. For 6 years, I wondered, why? Why would my sister, my only living family besides Thomas and our grown children, abandon me in my darkest hour? Had she blamed herself? Had the guilt been too much for her too? I tortured myself with questions that had no answers. Some nights, lying on that couch, I'd remember us as girls, braiding each other's hair, sharing secrets, promising we'd always be there for each other. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. Some other Helen, in some other life where sisters didn't vanish and husbands didn't fall downstairs and love didn't turn into an endless cycle of bedpans and pain medication. I should have wondered more about why she left. About what she knew. But I was too busy surviving to ask the right questions. So there we were, that Tuesday in March, in the passenger loading area of Millbrook General Hospital. 2 orderlies helped me get Thomas into a wheelchair. He was dead weight, couldn't support himself at all, and we made our way to the neurology department. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and despair. I sat there with my hand on Thomas's shoulder, watching other families navigate their own tragedies. A young mother with a toddler in a leg cast. An elderly man hunched over a walker. We were all just doing our best to survive another day. Helen Carter? I looked up to see a young woman in a white coat, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, a tablet tucked under her arm. She had kind eyes, but there was something sharp behind them. Something observant. I'm Dr. Amara Singh, she said, extending her hand. I'll be taking over your husband's care from Dr. Morrison. Nice to meet you, I said, shaking her hand. My palms were sweating. I was always nervous at these appointments, always afraid they'd tell me Thomas was getting worse. I had no idea I should have been afraid of the opposite. Dr. Singh was thorough in a way Dr. Morrison never had been. She checked Thomas's reflexes, shined lights in his eyes, asked me detailed questions about his medications, his daily routine, his responses to stimuli. Does he ever show any voluntary movement? She asked, making notes on her tablet. No, I said. Nothing. He's been completely paralyzed since the fall. And his medications, you administer all of them yourself? Yes. Every day. I have a chart at home. She nodded slowly, but something in her expression had shifted. It was subtle, a slight narrowing of her eyes, a pause before she spoke. Mrs. Carter, I'd like to run some additional blood work. Just routine, but Dr. Morrison's notes are, well, they're a bit sparse. I want to make sure we have a complete picture. Of course, I said. Whatever you think is best. Thomas sat there in his wheelchair, eyes unfocused, body slack. The perfect picture of a man trapped in a broken shell. Dr. Singh called a nurse to take Thomas for blood work, and I waited in that sterile examination room, flipping through a year-old magazine about gardening, wondering what I'd make for dinner, wondering if Medicare would cover the cost of the new pressure mattress the medical supply company kept calling about. Normal thoughts. Mundane thoughts. I had no idea that in another room, Dr. Singh was staring at Thomas's blood panel with growing alarm, her mind racing through possibilities that seemed too terrible to be true. 20 minutes later, Dr. Singh came back into the examination room. Alone. Her face had changed. The kindness was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Something that made my stomach drop. Mrs. Carter, she said carefully, closing the door behind her. I need you to sit down. What's wrong? My voice came out high and thin. Is Thomas okay? Is it? Thomas is fine, she interrupted. But I need to talk to you about something unusual. She pulled a chair close to mine, and I noticed her hands were trembling slightly as she held her tablet. The blood work came back quickly, she said. There are some concerning findings. Mrs. Carter, I found traces of benzodiazepines in your husband's system. And dantrolene. In significant quantities. I blinked at her. I don't understand. Those are his medications, aren't they? No, she said firmly. These drugs wouldn't be prescribed for someone with his supposed condition. In fact. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Mrs. Carter, these drugs, in these combinations and dosages, they don't treat paralysis. They cause it. The room tilted. What are you saying? I whispered. Dr. Singh leaned forward, her eyes intense, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I'm saying I don't believe your husband has ever been paralyzed. I believe he's been drugged. Consistently. For years. The air left my lungs. That's impossible, I heard myself say. He fell down the stairs. I saw it. The other doctors. Mrs. Carter. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was firm. Grounding. Listen to me very carefully. Someone has been administering these drugs to your husband. Either someone in your home, or... She paused. Or he's been doing it to himself. My vision blurred. The room spun. 6 years of my life flashed before my eyes, every bath, every meal, every sleepless night, every moment of crushing guilt and exhaustion. Dr. Singh's next words were quiet but absolute. "You need to call the police. Right now." And that's when my world shattered into 1,000 pieces. Because if what she was saying was true, if Thomas had been faking his paralysis for 6 years, then the question wasn't just how or why. The question was, what else had been a lie? And who else knew the truth? Have you ever had a moment where reality just breaks? Where everything you thought was solid ground turns out to be nothing but ice, and you're falling through into freezing water, and you can't breathe, can't think, can't do anything but drown? That's where Dr. Singh's words left me. You need to call the police. Right now. I sat there in that sterile hospital room, staring at this young doctor who just told me that my husband, my paralyzed, helpless husband who I'd bathed and fed and cared for like a child for 6 years, might have been faking it. That's impossible, I whispered again, but even as the words left my mouth, something dark and cold was unfurling in my chest. A terrible knowing. Because deep down, in a place I'd refused to look, I think I'd always known something was wrong. You don't spend 6 years caring for someone without learning their body, their rhythms, their patterns. And there had been moments, tiny, fleeting moments I'd brushed aside, where things didn't quite add up. The way his breathing would change when he thought I'd left the room. The time I came home early and could have sworn his wheelchair was in a different position. Those strange bruises on his legs that the doctors said were from poor circulation, but that seemed to appear in places that didn't make sense. I'd ignored it all. Because what was the alternative? That I was losing my mind? That I was so desperate for my husband to be okay that I was imagining things? Or worse, that he was lying to me? But here's what I didn't know yet, sitting in that examination room with my world crumbling around me, the lie was so much bigger than I could have imagined. And I was about to meet the detective who would help me uncover a betrayal so calculated, so cruel, that it would make Thomas's fake paralysis look like a mercy. Detective Maria Torres arrived at the hospital within 30 minutes. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that both terrified and comforted me. She wore a dark blazer and jeans, and when she shook my hand, her grip was firm enough to remind me I was still real, still here, still standing even though I felt like I was floating somewhere above my own body. "Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice gentle but professional. Dr. Singh briefed me on the situation. "I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to walk me through everything. Can you do that?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I could speak. We sat in a private consultation room, just me, Detective Torres, and Dr. Singh. Thomas was still in another room, being monitored, though I now understood that meant something very different than I'd thought an hour ago. "Tell me about the accident," Torres said, pulling out a notebook. 6 years ago. What happened?" So I told her. About the argument. About Claire being there. About Thomas at the top of the stairs, and the fall, and the awful sound of his body hitting the landing. About the hospital, the diagnosis, the doctors telling me he'd never walk again. Torres wrote everything down, her face unreadable. "And your sister, Claire, she was there when it happened?" "Yes. She left right before he fell. We were arguing about money, I think. Family money from our parents' estate." "And you haven't spoken to her since?" "No. She disappeared. Changed her number. I tried to reach her for months, but I trailed off, that old familiar guilt washing over me. I thought she blamed herself. Thought she couldn't face what happened." Torres exchanged a look with Dr. Singh. It was brief, but I caught it. A look that said, "There's more here." "Mrs. Carter," Torres said carefully, "Dr. Singh has recommended that we stop your husband's current medications under medical supervision." To see if. She paused. To see if his condition changes. My stomach dropped. You want to see if he can move? Yes. And if he can? My voice was barely a whisper. What does that mean? Torres leaned forward. It means we'll need to have a very different conversation. About who's been giving him these drugs. And why. They moved Thomas to a private room with a two-way mirror. I stood on the other side of that mirror with Torres and Dr. Singh, watching my husband of 32 years lie in a hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, completely unaware that we were watching him. Or was he aware? Had he always been aware? Had those vacant eyes been seeing everything while I poured out my heart to him, while I apologized for things that weren't my fault, while I slowly killed myself trying to keep him alive? We've discontinued all non-essential medications, Dr. Singh explained quietly. The benzodiazepines have a relatively short half-life. If he's been taking them regularly, we should see changes within 24 to 48 hours. And if nothing happens? I asked. Then I'm wrong, she admitted. And I'll owe you an enormous apology. But her tone told me she didn't think she was wrong. Torres touched my arm. Mrs. Carter, you don't have to watch this. You can go home, rest, and we'll call you. No, I interrupted. My voice was stronger than I expected. I've spent 6 years taking care of him. I'm not leaving now. So I stayed. I stayed through that first night, dozing in an uncomfortable chair in the observation room, jerking awake every time the nurses came to check on Thomas. I stayed through the next morning, watching him lie there, still and silent, exactly as he'd been for 6 years. Maybe Dr. Singh was wrong. Maybe this was all some terrible mistake, and I'd spend the rest of my life feeling guilty for doubting him. But then, on the second day, at approximately 2:47 in the afternoon, I know because I was staring at the clock, wondering if I should call our daughter, something changed. Thomas's hand moved. Not the involuntary twitch of muscles. Not the random spasm the doctors had warned me about. His fingers curled deliberately into a fist, then released. I stopped breathing. Did you see that? Dr. Singh whispered, though she was already moving toward the monitor, checking the readings. Torres stood up straighter, her hand instinctively moving toward her hip where I assumed she kept her gun. We all watched, frozen, as Thomas lay there for another few minutes. Still. Silent. Playing dead. And then, slowly, so slowly it was almost painful to watch, he turned his head. He looked toward the door, checking. Making sure no one was there. And then Thomas Carter, my paralyzed husband, sat up in bed. I made a sound. I don't know what it was, a gasp, a sob, a scream trapped in my throat. Torres grabbed my arm, steadying me, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the mirror. Thomas stretched his arms above his head like a man waking from a pleasant nap. He rolled his shoulders, rotated his neck. Then he swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up. 6 years. 6 years of telling me he couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but lie there like a breathing corpse. And here he was, walking across the room like there had never been anything wrong with him. He went to the window and looked out at the parking lot. His movements were fluid, easy. He wasn't stiff from years of immobility. He was practiced. Like he'd been doing this regularly. How many times? How many times had he gotten up when I left the room? When I went to work? When I finally collapsed on the couch at night, too exhausted to check on him one more time? That son of a bitch, Torres muttered under her breath. Dr. Singh was already on her phone, calling someone, speaking in rapid medical terminology I couldn't process. I just stood there, watching my husband move freely around the room, and I felt something inside me crack wide open. Not sadness. Not grief. Rage. Pure, white-hot, incandescent rage. "I want to talk to him," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like it belonged to someone harder, someone who'd been forged in fire. "Mrs. Carter, I don't think," Torres began. "I want to talk to him. Now." They let me in the room. Torres came with me, standing by the door, her hand resting casually on her belt. A reminder to Thomas that he was caught. That this game was over. He was back in bed when I entered, lying perfectly still, eyes vacant. Playing his role. Still trying to maintain the lie even though he knew we'd seen him. The audacity of it nearly knocked me off my feet. "Thomas," I said quietly. "Nothing. Just that empty stare at the ceiling." "Thomas, I know you can hear me." Still nothing. Something snapped inside me. I walked to the bed and grabbed his face, forcing him to look at me. His skin was warm, alive, real. Not the cold, clammy skin of someone truly paralyzed. "Look at me, you bastard." His eyes flickered. Just for a second, I saw recognition. Awareness. And something else. Fear. "We saw you," I said, my voice shaking. "We saw you get up. Walk around. So you can drop the act, because it's over." For a long moment, he didn't move. Didn't respond. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out his next move. And then, slowly, his face changed. The vacant expression melted away, replaced by something cold. Something calculating. Something I'd never seen before on my husband's face. "Helen," he said. His voice was rusty from disuse, but clear. Perfectly clear. "You were never going to let me go." I stepped back like he'd slapped me. "What?" He sat up, no pretense now, no fake paralysis. Just a man in a hospital bed, looking at his wife with something that might have been contempt. "You smothered me," he said flatly. "For years, before the accident. Always hovering, always needing, always demanding more of me than I could give. I felt like I was drowning, and you just kept pulling me under. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. So yes," he continued, his voice getting stronger. "I faked it. I found a way out. And you want to know something? It was peaceful. Lying there, listening to you talk to me like I was a child, watching you kill yourself trying to take care of me? That was the freest I'd felt in years." Torres moved forward. "Mr. Carter, I need to advise you." But I held up my hand, stopping her. Because I needed to hear this. Needed to understand. 6 years, I whispered. I gave you 6 years of my life. I gave up everything, my career, my health, my sanity. And you're telling me it was because you felt smothered? Thomas shrugged. Actually shrugged. You asked for the truth. Why? The word ripped out of me. Why not just divorce me? Why put me through this? And that's when his expression changed again. When I saw something flicker across his face that made my blood run cold. Guilt. Not for what he'd done to me. But for something else. Something he didn't want to tell me. Torres saw it too. She stepped closer to the bed, her voice taking on that hard professional edge. Mr. Carter, there's something else, isn't there? This wasn't just about escaping your marriage. He looked away. Thomas, I said quietly. What else did you do? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, I knew. Somehow, I knew. This wasn't just about him faking paralysis. This was about money. About manipulation. About someone else. Where's Claire? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Where's my sister, Thomas? And when he met my eyes again, when I saw that flash of something that might have been triumph, I understood that the betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. Torres had Thomas arrested that same day. I watched them put handcuffs on him, read him his rights, walk him out of that hospital room in a wheelchair, ironic, considering, and I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty numbness where my heart used to be. But Torres wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Mrs. Carter, she said, guiding me to a quiet corner of the hospital. I need you to understand something. Your husband's deception, faking his paralysis, that's fraud, false imprisonment, possibly elder abuse. But I think there's more here. The way he reacted when you mentioned your sister? That's not just guilt. That's fear of being caught. Caught doing what? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. I don't know yet. But I'd like your permission to bring in a forensic accountant. To look at your family's finances. All of them. I thought about our mounting debt. About the medical bills I'd been drowning in. About how Thomas had insisted on handling all the finances even after the accident, signing documents with a special stamp since he couldn't hold a pen. Oh God. Do it, I said. Look at everything. It took the forensic accountant 3 days to unravel what Thomas had been doing. 3 days for me to discover that my life hadn't just been a lie, it had been a carefully orchestrated theft. Torres came to my house, the house that suddenly felt foreign and hostile, every corner hiding secrets, and sat me down at my own kitchen table with a woman named Patricia Chin, who looked at me with a mixture of professional detachment and genuine pity. Mrs. Carter, Patricia began, spreading documents across the table. Over the past 6 years, approximately $340,000 has been transferred out of your joint accounts, your retirement funds, and various investments. The number hit me like a physical blow. That's everything. That's our entire savings. Yes, she said gently. The transfers were done in small increments. Nothing large enough to trigger bank alerts. Very carefully calculated to avoid detection. Where did it go? I whispered. Patricia slid a document toward me. A bank statement. For an account I'd never seen before. A joint account, she said. Opened 7 years ago. In the names of Thomas Carter and Claire Carter. The room tilted. My sister's name. Right there in black and white, next to my husband's. That's impossible, I said, but even as I spoke, memories were flooding back. Thomas and Claire at family gatherings, always talking in corners. The way Claire had looked at him sometimes. The arguments we'd had about her, about boundaries, about trust. How long had I been blind? Torres leaned forward. Mrs. Carter, we've been trying to locate your sister. Her last known address was in Portland, but she moved 6 months ago. We're still tracking her down, but... She hesitated. We did find something else. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph. Security camera footage from a bank, dated 3 months ago. There was Thomas. Walking. Into a bank, no wheelchair in sight, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses but unmistakably him. And beside him, her hand in his, laughing at something he'd said. Claire. My baby sister. The girl I'd braided hair with, shared secrets with, protected from our father's temper and our mother's disappointments. The woman who'd been sleeping with my husband and stealing my life savings while I killed myself taking care of him. We think, Torres said carefully, that the accident was staged. That your husband never fell down those stairs, or if he did, it was intentional. To create a situation where you'd be too guilty, too devoted to question anything. While you were focused on caring for him, he had all the time in the world to transfer your assets and plan his exit strategy with your sister. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't process it. Mrs. Carter? Patricia's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you okay? Was I okay? I'd just discovered that my husband and sister had been conspiring against me for years. That they'd used my love, my guilt, my sense of duty as weapons. That every moment I'd spent feeling like a saint, the whole town had been praising a woman who was actually the world's biggest fool. I need to see her, I said. My voice was flat, emotionless. I need to see Claire. Torres exchanged a glance with Patricia. Mrs. Carter, I don't think. Find her, I interrupted. And when you do, I want to be there. I want to look her in the eye and ask her why. Because that was the question that was eating me alive. Not how. Not when. Why? What had I done to deserve this? What had I done to make the two people I loved most decide that destroying me was worth it? They found Claire a week later. She was living in a condo in Seattle, paid for, I later learned, with my retirement money. She'd been working as a yoga instructor, posting on social media about living her authentic life and releasing toxic energy. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't made me want to vomit. Torres arranged for Claire to come in for questioning. She didn't tell her I'd be there. That was my idea. I wanted to see her face when she realized she'd been caught. I sat in an interrogation room, me, Helen Carter, retired English teacher and devoted wife, sitting in a police interrogation room like I was in some crime drama, waiting for my sister to walk through that door. When she did, I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight. Her hair was different, shorter, dyed a shade of auburn I'd never seen on her. She wore expensive yoga pants and a designer jacket. She looked healthy. Happy. Thriving. On my money. On my suffering. And then she saw me. The color drained from her face. For a moment, I saw genuine shock, maybe even fear. But then something else replaced it. Something hard and defiant. Helen, she said. Just my name. Like we were meeting for coffee, not sitting across from each other after she'd helped steal my life. Sit down, Ms. Carter, Torres said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Claire sat. She wouldn't look at me. You want to tell us about your relationship with Thomas Carter? Torres began. I want a lawyer, Claire said immediately. You're not under arrest, Torres replied. Yet. But we can change that very quickly if you'd prefer. Or you can answer some questions and we can all go home. Claire's jaw tightened. She glanced at me, then away. What do you want to know? How long? I asked. My voice surprised me, it was steady, cold. How long have you been sleeping with my husband? She flinched. Helen. How long? A long pause. Then, 15 years. The words hit me like bullets. 15 years. Our entire marriage had been a lie. We met first, Claire said, and now there was anger in her voice. Actual anger, like she had any right to that emotion. Before you, Helen. At that conference in Chicago. We fell in love. And then you swooped in with your perfect teacher smile and your wholesome persona, and he chose you because you were the good girl. The one mom and dad would approve of. So this was revenge? I asked. 15 years of betrayal because he chose me 30 years ago? It wasn't just about that, she snapped. It was about everything. You always got everything, Helen. The better grades, the better job, the inheritance when mom and dad died. You always came first. So you decided to take my husband and my money. He was mine first. The childishness of it, the sheer, breathtaking selfishness, actually made me laugh. A harsh, bitter sound I didn't recognize. And the accident? Torres interjected. The fall down the stairs. Was that staged? Claire pressed her lips together. We have evidence, Torres continued. We know Thomas was never paralyzed. We know he's been faking it for 6 years. We just need to know whose idea it was. His, Claire finally said. It was his idea. After Helen found us together that day. I didn't find you together, I interrupted. I found his phone. Text messages. I confronted him, and you were there, and we argued, and then he fell, Claire finished. Or said he did. It was so easy, Helen. You felt so guilty. You believed everything the doctors said because you wanted it to be real. You wanted to be the martyr. Have you ever wanted to reach across a table and hurt someone? Really hurt them? Not because you're violent, but because the pain inside you is so big, so overwhelming, that you need it to go somewhere else? That's how I felt, looking at my sister. This woman I'd loved. Protected. Mourned for 6 years. Why didn't he just divorce me? I asked quietly. If he loved you so much, why not just leave? And that's when Claire smiled. Actually smiled. Because of the money, Helen. It's always been about the money. Your retirement accounts, the house, the inheritance from mom and dad that you got most of. If he divorced you, he'd have to split it. This way? She shrugged. He gets it all. We get it all. And you get to play the saint while we build our life somewhere else. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. We were going to wait another year, she continued, and there was something almost wistful in her voice now. Let you pay off more of the medical debt with your salary. Then Thomas was going to die, peacefully, in his sleep. You'd get the life insurance. We'd get everything else. Clean break. Torres was writing furiously in her notebook. You're confessing to conspiracy to commit fraud, theft, and... I'm done talking, Claire said abruptly, standing up. Get me that lawyer now. But before Torres could respond, I stood too. I walked around that table until I was standing right in front of my sister. Close enough to see the flecks of gold in her eyes that I'd always envied when we were children. I hope it was worth it, I said softly. I hope every dollar you spent, every moment you had with him, every time you laughed at how stupid I was, I hope it was worth what's coming next. Claire's defiance faltered. Just for a second. Because I'm not the woman you left behind 6 years ago, I continued. That woman died the moment I saw Thomas walk across that hospital room. The woman standing here now? She's done being anyone's fool. And she's going to make sure you both pay for every single thing you've taken from her. I turned and walked out of that interrogation room with my head held high. Behind me, I heard Claire start to cry. I didn't look back. That night, sitting alone in my house, not ours anymore, never ours again, I made a list. Not of what I'd lost. Not of what they'd taken. A list of what I was going to take back. My money. My dignity. My name. Torres called the next morning. Claire's agreed to testify against Thomas in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's giving us everything, dates, amounts, the whole plan. Good, I said. Mrs. Carter, I have to ask, are you okay? Was I okay? I thought about the woman I'd been a week ago. The exhausted, guilt-ridden saint who'd given everything for a lie. That woman was gone. I'm better than okay, detective, I said. I'm ready to fight. And fight I did. Because here's what I learned in that interrogation room, watching my sister try to justify the unjustifiable. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who know exactly where to aim. They know your weak spots, your fears, your capacity for guilt and love. But here's what they don't know, what they can't know until it's too late. That same capacity for love, when it's betrayed, can transform into something else entirely. Something strong. Something unbreakable. Something that won't stop until justice is served. You want to know what revenge feels like? Not the hot, impulsive kind you see in movies. No. Real revenge is cold. Patient. Strategic. Real revenge is standing in a courtroom, looking at the two people who tried to destroy you, and watching their faces as the judge reads their sentence. After that confrontation with Claire, after I walked out of that interrogation room feeling like I'd been reborn in fire, I had a choice: retreat into the shadows or fight. I chose to fight. But here's the question that haunted me: after you reclaim what was stolen, after your betrayers face consequences, who are you then? The trial came 6 months later. My lawyer, Maya Chin, a brilliant young public defender, told me, "We're not just seeking justice. We're reclaiming your narrative." I liked the sound of that. The courtroom was packed. Thomas sat in a wheelchair, still playing his part. Claire sat separately, eyes red from crying, her plea deal already secured, 3 years in exchange for testimony. When I testified, Maya asked how I felt discovering the truth. I felt like I'd died, I said, looking at Thomas. Like the woman I'd been had simply ceased to exist. And now? Free. For the first time in 6 years, I feel free. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Thomas got 8 years. Claire got 3. Is it enough? Maya asked afterward. I thought about the 6 years I'd lost. Prison couldn't erase the betrayal or heal the wounds. It's enough, I said. I sold the house immediately. Couldn't live there anymore, every room held ghosts. Most of the stolen money was recovered. About 70%. Enough to start over. I moved to a small coastal town 3 hours away, a place where nobody knew my story. Rented a cottage with an ocean view. It was small, just 2 rooms, but it was mine. The first morning there, I made coffee and sat on the porch, watching the sunrise over the water. And I cried. Not from sadness. From relief. Because for the first time in 6 years, I had nobody to take care of but myself. I started tutoring at the local high school. One of my students asked, "Mrs. Carter, did you always know your own voice?" No, I admitted. I lost it for a while. But I found it again. How? By refusing to stay silent. 6 months after the trial, Thomas sent a letter from prison. It was full of excuses, self-pity, a man who still couldn't take responsibility. I never meant to hurt you. I was trapped in a life I didn't choose. I wrote back one sentence: I forgive you. Not for you. For me. You no longer have power over my peace. I never mailed it. Instead, I burned it in my fireplace, along with his letter. Watched the words disappear into ash. It was closure. A way of saying, this chapter is over. I met Robert at the farmer's market. He was 70, a widower with kind eyes and a gentle soul. We became friends. Nothing rushed. Just two people who'd survived loss, finding comfort in coffee and easy conversation. When I finally told him my story, he simply said, "You're stronger than you know." "I'm learning that," I replied. A year after the trial, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. My hair was fully gray. New lines around my eyes. I looked older. But I also looked alive. My eyes had light again. When I smiled at my reflection, it was genuine. "Hello, Helen," I said to myself. "Nice to see you again." So what did I learn from 6 years of lies and betrayal so deep it shattered everything? I learned that compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. I learned that guilt is a weapon in the wrong hands. Most importantly, you can survive anything if you remember who you are beneath the roles you play. I'm 72 now. Thomas is still in prison. Claire moved to California. I have no interest in knowing more. Because my life isn't about them anymore. It's about morning coffee on my porch. About tutoring students. About walks on the beach with Robert. It's about looking in the mirror and recognizing the woman staring back. That woman has nothing left to give anyone who doesn't deserve it. And she finally deserves her own kindness. Have you ever had someone betray your trust so completely it changed who you were? Have you had to rebuild yourself from nothing? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. Because speaking your truth is the first step toward reclaiming your power. If you found strength in my story, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear they're stronger than they know. Because we're all survivors of something. And our stories? They matter.